Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, helping higher education marketing leaders share knowledge about learning, strategies, and tactics that are relevant today. See what you can learn today by listening to one of our episodes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, hosted by Concept 3D. If you like our content, please follow or subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, or Google. My name is Shiro Tori, and I will be your host today. And for today's episode, I'm really thrilled to learn more about how IT and student affairs can join forces to create a better student engagement experience. Plus, we'll also cover something new, which is Paul's take on the future of higher ed one cards. So with that, I'm really excited to have Paul Schantz join us today. Paul is the Director of Web and Technology Services at California State University, Northridge, which we'll be referring to as CSUN in short on today's recording. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hi, Shiro. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And I do ask all my guests this as an icebreaker. Paul, please tell me what you love about higher ed.
I think in higher ed, it's really all about the people and how helpful everybody is. In fact, that was probably one of the biggest adjustments that I personally had when coming from the corporate sector about 18 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think in our intro call, speaking about being invested in higher ed, you had just reached to the day your 18th year with CSUN. So that was fabulous. So now you're at 18 plus, right?
That's correct. I can vote now, or my career at CSUN can vote now.
That's funny. Awesome. Well, you mentioned a little bit about your background just now, coming from the corporate side. Can you tell us a little bit more about your past careers and your current role now?
Well, prior to joining CSUN, I worked in a couple of Fortune 50 corporations, primarily doing front-end web application development and web design work. The job that I had immediately prior to CSUN, I was working for a banking institution on all of their new customer acquisition web properties. So if there was any incoming requests that were coming from, say, Yahoo Finance placements, or from Google organic search, or Google paid search, television, radio, any kind of advertising, they were coming through the web pages that I managed, which had forms on them. And we had everything very highly instrumented. So we knew every campaign where people were coming from. And when somebody clicked on the submit button for the form, it would go into our lead gen system and get distributed out to one of the thousands of offices across the country. So when I came to CSUN, I was in 2006, I was very interested in the student outreach and recruitment activities. And this was long before the enrollment cliff that everybody's talking about now. Mm-hmm. Folks in the corporate world have been thinking about this sort of thing for a long time. So it's an interesting topic to me, and I think that there's a very clear tie-in to building good web experiences for our students.
That's fantastic. And yeah, I think one thing I learned from you is that you actually do have a pretty strong background in marketing for someone with what seems to be more of like an IT role title. And that really stood out to me because that doesn't really happen in a lot of the calls I have with someone with a web director or web services title. So that was super interesting and made me more excited to talk to you as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, the mission statement that we have for my department, it's pretty simple, and that's to deliver user-friendly, student-centric online student services. So that really runs the gamut. And it not only does it benefit things like, the student experience, it also helps with the outreach and recruitment component that I already mentioned. But it has benefits across the board. It includes things like ADA accessibility and so on, making the experiences as useful for every student as possible.
Gotcha. And where does your role fit into in terms of like a department? Are you tied with enrollment? I think you mentioned student affairs. Like, where do you sit in under the umbrella of things?
Well, back in 2006, when I was hired as a web development manager. And at that time, CSUN did not have a content management system, like an enterprise one, that
Hmm.
there was no templating system or so, in use by the campus. And therefore, every department across campus kind of had their own variation of web pages. Some of them looked very professional. Some of them looked like a student had developed them. There was very little consistency. And that's what I was hired to do, was to implement some form of consistency and branding and marketing across the entire division of student affairs. So one of the very first projects that we had was to develop a template like that, and to staff up my team with designers and developers who could help to make that happen. And since then, of course, the campus does have an enterprise content management system. And kind of an interesting side note, a tangent, is one of the earliest tasks that I had was to survey the enterprise content management system marketplace to see if there was anything that could fit that we could implement, not just for student affairs, but for the entire
Hmm.
Cal State Northridge campus. And the reality is that it was still too early for our average users to understand what that was all about and to apply themselves, much less, thinking about the consistency across all websites across the entire campus. So that never really went anywhere here on this campus, but the core of the analysis of the work that I had done on that did end up going to our chancellor's office via my boss at the time. He shared that the technical scoping document that I had written, and that did end up going into a master enabling agreement that the chancellor's office put out. And I know that several campuses within the Cal State system did end up using it. So it wasn't for nothing that I did that work. So that's good.
Got it. Yeah, I can imagine. Like, I think 2006. I don't think these popular CMSs that are out there today, like they were just getting developed or they didn't exist yet. So that's pretty fascinating. You made that recommendation before the tech was even caught up to market. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, even in the corporate sector, there was a hodgepodge of solutions, and most large organizations, they customize them for their own needs anyhow. So I don't
Yeah.
think there's such a thing as a vanilla implementation.
Gotcha. So you sit now under student affairs, right? And so you effectively have one foot in IT, and then you have one foot in student affairs, which I believe at CSUN also includes enrollment. Is that right?
That's correct.
So you got one foot in the door in IT, student affairs, enrollment. How does student affairs and enrollment benefit from having you on their team?
Well, it's interesting because until about a year and a half, 2 years ago, the enrollment function actually lived in the academic affairs division.
Oh, really? Okay.
So there was a transition a couple years ago, and there were a number of folks on that enrollment services team, and that included admissions and records as well.
Hmm.
Um, and they had some technology staff; they still do. They do not report to me, but I and my department are very closely aligned with the vice president for student affairs office. So we have been as long as I have been here. And so my team plays mostly an advisory role. And oftentimes we play a role as an intermediary between central IT. We have a central IT division as
Hmm.
well. I'm in what you would call a distributed IT unit. And what we do is we provide input mostly in the initial purchasing and like the RFP process, where we're analyzing what kinds of APIs the solution has, as well as considerations around accessibility. Because in our division, we have three departments that deal with accessibility concerns, and we can talk about those a little bit later. But I also, and my team also has connections with our university relations and advancement team, which is where the professional communicators and PR folks for the university reside. And they have helped us in terms of some of the branding concerns, as well as, and I know I'm kind of veering off into a tangent, so please steer me
No
back if
worries. I'm
I get too
listening.
far afield. But in our division, we've also had a student marketing and communications team as well. And so they're producing a lot of the marketing materials for any of the work that enrollment services is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And they take the lead from university relations and advancement in terms of like the look and feel and, some of the kinds of graphics that we will use, although they do their own photography and that sort of thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's led into some interesting conversations around adoption of a digital asset management system, which we are literally in the RFP process right now. And I've been very heavily involved in that with my colleague in university relations and advancement taking the lead on that. But because of my experience, it was, I think, helpful for them to get an understanding of the kinds of features and functions that they might want to have for integrations and so on. Don't know if I directly answered everything.
Yeah. So kind of what I'm hearing is like, because you have experience in marketing, you have experience in IT, and you've worked with many solutions in your career. You're able to advise on best practices, accessibility concerns that you can take on from central IT, and you can kind of face them up front with your with under the student affairs division. And this enrollment being a part of student affairs is interesting because often I see enrollment admissions as a separate department, maybe adjacent to student affairs, but also its own separate entity. And so the fact that it lives under student affairs now is very interesting. And it sounds like university advancement is actually leading a lot of the charge in the branding of CSUN. Is that right? A digital asset branding?
Our university relations and advancement, they're public facing for like the community. So like when
Right.
there's press releases and outward facing stuff, and they handle a lot of things. Like there's always some filming going on. There's a
Mm-hmm.
large production, I think, for some Apple TV show like this whole week on campus because of how close we are to Hollywood and Burbank and the studios and such. So
Right.
they also manage that aspect of, the community relations. But our student marketing and communications team is awesome. They do all kinds of collateral for, the web and digital print, everything. And we work very closely with them. My team is primarily, as you had alluded to, provides a consultative role. Because as I had mentioned, in my past life in corporate world, we had instrumented everything. So we knew exactly where people were clicking on. We were doing
Mm-hmm.
A/B and multivariate testing on the different kinds of campaigns that we were running. And when you really open the spigot, you can really see a difference just in the color of the text of the headline or the photo of the people that you have. It really does make a difference in the conversion rates. And so it's kind of fun. And we've been doing click tracking and like heat maps of all of our
Right.
web properties since I started here for a long time.
Are there related to that? Are there certain trends you're seeing uh, in web that have been helpful to create a better experience? Whether that's the delivery of information, making things more navigable for students and visitors on your website. Like, are you seeing any changes? I'd assume one of them would be mobile first experience now, but maybe there's something deeper there that you've been noticing or realizing.
Yeah, it's interesting. You would think that when talking to a technologist, you would talk about the instrumentation, you talk about the mobile first, like you say. But realistically speaking, the biggest thing is in the writing on the website and making sure that you're conveying the correct
Mm-hmm.
message that your website visitors are looking for. So that's what drives conversion rates. And it also drives convenience too for the user, because they're going to come to your website, they're looking for something. And all too frequently, I think that higher education institutions, they write at the 16th and 17th grade level. And, our freshmen, they're just coming out of high school. And on our campus in particular, and also most of the Cal State schools, we should be writing at about the 8th or ninth grade level.
Mm-hmm.
So the investment in rewriting the content is actually, I think, the most valuable thing that you could do with your website. I mean, that's going to help everybody. And quite honestly, many folks, especially if they are new, like maybe they're a new leader in their department,
Right.
they oftentimes want to put absolutely everything in their website. And it kind of reminds me of my experience during the Web 1.0 boom. Even the smallest businesses, they wanted to recreate Amazon. It's like, that's probably not a very realistic approach. When you're selling, I don't know, like fishing lures. I don't know, just pulled that out of the air, but we see that a lot in higher education as well. Simplification.
Got it. Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, because this is a big assumption, is if I'm talking to someone in IT and web, usually, like, I feel like we get down to a lot of the nitty gritty really quickly, right? Like SEO optimization, page speed, which does make a big impact, but we kind of think of all of these tactical, more technical details. And I think with all the new technology coming out, we like tend to really hover around that. But I think messaging, like you mentioned, is such a key component of marketing, and has been for hundreds of years. And we can't lose sight of that, right?
Yeah, and in fact, I'll give a more human answer to that. When I first started as the web development manager here, one of the first things we did was to start instrumenting all of our stuff to measure things like page load times and AppDex scores. Like how fast is the page loading? And I was very proud of myself for having implemented that, and taking that to my vice president for student affairs. I would share, look how fast this is loading, and it's like. But after a certain point, I mean, the eyes glaze over, and it's like, well, he doesn't really care about that. But on the other hand, when I share a heat map or show like a click map of where people are clicking on a web page, that tells a story almost immediately with a picture. And you can see exactly what people are clicking on and what they're not clicking on. And that's extremely helpful, especially for a property that's as valuable as like a university's homepage. And oftentimes there is jockeying for position. Well, there's always jockeying for position on any organization's homepage. So, and if an organization is truly interested in making data informed decisions, then in my opinion, they would have somebody who handles the analytics and is able to tell the story about what information should be in what spaces on any given web page.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's super helpful. Have there been any shifts or changes you've made in recent years, as an example, that has really helped? Maybe it started just as an A/B test, but have really helped improve any part of the website.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's been some changes, particularly around some of the things that are included in the header of the web pages. Also establishing limits, for example, on like mega menus. I mean, they're very, very common. But the reality is that most of the individual operational departments don't need to have all of that if they're organizing their information appropriately. So we have limits to the number of navigation elements that go in, say, like a top navigation. What kinds of things should go in a left-hand navigation and that sort of thing.
Gotcha. So kind of going back to the simplification that you talked about. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I remember like a this was, I think, on MySpace, but I remember people were really like messing around with how to make their web page look prettier, and like there was like you could have like stars falling from your uh your mouse key or your mouse arrow, and like that was popular. Like definitely unnecessary now, but it kind of just reminds me of like that's just an extra thing. You don't need to do that, and you can simplify now. That's great. Awesome. Well, I love all the specific examples you provided me. I kind of wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about something you're currently researching for your dissertation on, and so that's one cards, right? So let's talk about one cards and what's with you and one cards.
Oh, well, thank you. You'll have to stop me because I'll, like anybody who's talking about their doctoral dissertation, we have a tendency to ramble. But I've got my elevator speech that I've gotten narrowed down to like one sentence, and so this is the idea. The basic idea is that if a university has a mature implementation of a one card system, they are more likely to have students who persist and graduate. Okay, so that's the thrust of my thesis. And what got me interested, now I'll kind of expand on it. The thing that got me very interested in Campus One cards is their similarity to customer loyalty cards that companies like Target and supermarkets use. So every time that you use one of those cards as a consumer, that records a transaction that the company then uses for determining what kinds of products that they're going to stock on their shelves. And there's downstream, I guess they would be upstream impacts on the supply chain and so on. But they're also developing a profile about you as a consumer, not you specifically as an individual, but generally as like a consumer segment. And the Campus One cards are a very mature technology. They've been around for over 40 years in the form of an ID card. In the old days, it would be an ID card that had your picture, your student ID number, and maybe a barcode so you could check things out at the library. But they've vastly expanded now to encompass all kinds of things, like meal plans, a declining balance. So you can use it like a debit card on campus and with approved vendors off campus. You can use it as a key for your dorm room. You can use it to get through the turnstiles in the recreation center, to attend sporting events, and so on. So in many ways, there are analogies to the click tracking like Google Analytics on a web page, only you have either a plastic card, which the way that I've defined it for folks who maybe are unfamiliar with what a one card is imagine taking your driver's license, a credit card, and like a hotel room key, and taping those three cards together. Only now you can have it as an application on your phone. So the card swipe is kind of the coin of the realm, right? So in many ways, what this does is within the circumscribed boundaries of a university, you have the entire user experience of a student, all the different kinds of transactions that they have as they go around campus. So what events they swipe into and so on. So the connection up to this seems to be like the perfect intersection between technology and student affairs. Because in student affairs, which I've been in for 18 years, it's everything to do with a student that is not in the classroom. And that is a very, very wide range of services and activities. So it can be sporting events, it could be the recreation center, it can be housing, getting into your dorm room, the gates, clubs and organizations. There's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of opportunities to interact. And all it is just a swipe of the card. Just, that the student has been somewhere at a certain time to attend a particular event, or there's a transaction there. There's a record of it.
Right.
And the my interest here from a theoretical perspective is that in student affairs, we're very interested in student engagement. And one of the pillars of student affairs theory was Alexander Aston, and he has a theory of student involvement, which later changed. Involvement and engagement are often used kind of interchangeably.
Mm-hmm.
And the basic theory is quite simple. It's that the more that students have meaningful engagement with programming that the university is putting on,
Mm-hmm.
the more likely that they are to persist and engage. So the question that every operation has on a campus is which engagements and at what level is going to generate the greatest amount of engagement, which leads to those greater retention numbers and
Mm-hmm.
greater graduation rates, higher graduation rates. So the kind of the conceit of my my research questions, which I won't go into here, it's that if a university is invested in such a system, and they frequently, if they've been around for 20 or 30 years, there are dozens and dozens of systems that connect to a one card system,
Mm-hmm.
that chances are good you're doing reporting on what's happening with that system. Well, what are students swiping into? And also, if it's accepted in more places, chances are good that student affairs professionals are using that data as well to make data-informed decisions. And if they're doing that, then they're probably using the data to make continuous improvement in their programming and the events and so on. And therefore, that leads to higher persistence and graduation rates. So it's kind of a big, it's sort of a big topic, and it's a quantitative study. So I've had to do an awful lot of narrowing my focus, or else I would just never get done. But I'll be using the IPEDS data set for doing my regression testing and so on, and determining if, are there differences, in the types of universities
Mm-hmm.
and the types of card systems that are in use and so on. So
Gotcha. Yeah.
that's a big nutshell.
Yeah. I have a lot of comments and questions. I attended university just over a decade ago now, and I attended a large state university, University of Colorado, in Boulder, and we had a one card system. Like you said, it wasn't on our mobile phones yet, but it got me into my dorm. It helped pay for meals. It got me discounts adjacent to campus. It was basically like your driver's license, student credit card, etc. Like you mentioned, I think it got me into some lab rooms too. I can't quite remember, but yeah, like very familiar with the concept. I was curious, what percentage of schools today don't have a one card system? Because I went to a school that did, so it's kind of hard for me to understand which schools don't.
It's interesting because I and CSUN is a member of the National Association of Campus Card Users, or NACU, and they have about 500 universities that are members. Obviously, there's a lot more universities than that have one card systems. I'm actually not 100% sure, but my guess would be that at least 50% of the campuses in the United States have some form of a one card system.
So based on your theory and your like one liner, right, is that the 50% that don't have a one card system are, I don't know if risk is the right word, but have less data to work with, less inputs to work with to help figure out data around student engagement with campus, and therefore maybe missing out on opportunities to help increase retention because they don't have that data. Is that another way I could look at this?
Well, potentially. I don't know that I would necessarily agree 100% with that statement, because oftentimes it's not that we need to have more data. Like I mentioned before, many campuses have had a one card system for decades.
Right.
And they are sitting on mountains of data. And it's not for want of data that campuses are not using the information. So I think that it's important for a campus to have a culture of using data and knowing where to go and the appropriateness and having the awareness of the associated laws around privacy and security before they can really meaningfully do any kind of high level, analysis of this data. The vast majority of folks, I am sure, in the student affairs profession, they are using information that's derived from card swipes at a department level. So, for example, a large event is happening and students swipe into that event, and the organization that's putting on the event, they want to know what the attendance was. They might do some analysis of the demographics, X percentage of attendees were freshmen versus sophomores and that sort of thing. And in that way, I think that is the way to open the door for creating this culture of data. And here's, I'll kind of digress briefly here. Student affairs professionals are often viewed as not being particularly technical, but in my experience, when you ask them, well, what kinds of operational questions would you like to have answered? They have a ton of them, and they have a pretty darn good idea of like where that data would live and what it would look like. They don't necessarily know, okay, well, how do I go about getting access to a database? Yeah. It's like they oftentimes don't know who to ask or the terminology that they would need to use in order to get it. And then once, and sometimes when they do get it, they're just given this huge data dump. It's basically just a big, an ETL process, an extract, transform, and load. So it's like they're given a gigantic like Excel spreadsheet or something. And they're kind of like, okay, I don't know what to do with this. And so kind of helping to pave that road a little bit to make it a little bit easier and kind of start with small projects like pilots. Hey, like what's one thing that you have this burning desire to know about your operation and how it benefits the student experience? And that's kind of the approach that I'm starting to take, and trying to develop some kind of a framework for thinking about that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like how you tie this back to student retention. I don't have the numbers out in front of me, but I believe the dropout rate of a student from any four-year institution is like 67, the retention rate is 67%. 10% of those students actually transfer to another school. So effectively the retention rate is more like 77 or 78%. But that's, when you look at that the other way, there's, 20 or plus percent of dropout from an institution. And that's a big opportunity for the school to learn more about and ultimately providing a better experience or engagement or better education for the student. So I think this is super fascinating stuff.
Well, and for sure, there are differences in the retention rates for different student demographics as well. And our campus has been doing an awful lot of work in disaggregation of that data. And when you talk about certain types of student populations, say like your Black students or Asian American students, they're oftentimes quite small. And I kind of hesitate to bring the whole sales component back in, but I mean, in my prior life, it was just a truism. It's like it's less expensive to retain the customers that you already have. Absolutely. So a lot of the sexiness around recruitment and getting new people, getting new blood onto your campus, that's something that a lot of people will crow about. But once the students actually arrive on your campus, are you providing them with meaningful experiences that make them want to stay? And when you're talking about some of those underserved minority populations, the numbers are actually quite manageable. I mean, you're talking oftentimes hundreds or sometimes even dozens. It's like, okay, well, what are we doing to make sure that our campus is a welcoming place for them? so that they do want to stay. And that investment is actually quite a bit less, but it requires, I think, a more high touch experience. And that kind of ties back to the communication aspect. And it's like, say what you need to say. Don't say it with a wall of text. Keep it short. Make sure you're having a meaningful conversation with them.
This is super interesting stuff. Yeah, and I know we're almost at time here, but yeah, I know student retention is a big topic for higher ed student affairs, and they say that oftentimes, if a lot of the tools out there that indicate like if a student is not going to class, it's already too late. Like that indication is not good. So how can we get ahead of that? And I think this is one of a really cool way where a lot of schools already have this data. They just don't know how to digest it, that they can utilize, hopefully.
Every director of every department that I have ever met has always had at least one or two hypotheses about how the work that they do and the programming and events that they conduct benefit the student. And there are also other hypotheses that they would like to test that they just don't have the bandwidth or the understanding about, like, okay, well, what data would I need in order to make this happen? And then how would I interpret that? And that, I think, is going to be the next big thing within the field of student affairs.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see more research come out on this topic, and so I can keep talking about student retention, because I don't think it gets talked about enough in higher ed. Paul, thanks so much for joining the podcast today. I think we need to do another episode on accessibility, because there's a whole another 18 years of things you've done at CSUN that we didn't get to talk about here today. But it's been amazing having you on. So thank you so much.
I'd love to do another session with you. Thanks for inviting me again, Shiro. It's a pleasure being here.
Thanks so much. And thanks for our listeners for tuning in. Please catch us on the next episode.